Well, good morning, Southern Oregon, and welcome back to the Real Estate Show. So glad you could join us today. We have a special treat for you. We have not only Brad Bennington from Southern Oregon Builders Association, but Guy Giles is in Mexico volunteering to build a house for a needy family. Guy Giles is with Mutual Mortgage, and he and Brad Bennington are going to be on the show today, and we're going to bring it to you from Mexico. So it's going to be a great show. Hope you stay tuned. In the meantime, we're going to take a quick minute and jump into our local statistics for Jackson, Josephine, and Klamath counties. Jackson County prices year over year are down 5%. The average single family home in Jackson County this week costing $551,763. Numbers sold year over year are down 24%. We had 41 closings in Jackson County this week in the residential market. Number of listings year over year are up in Jackson County this week. We have 829 active listings in the residential market in Jackson County. Josephine County prices are up 39%. That's 39. Average single family home costing $349,000, and that's year over year in the residential market this week. Number of solds are down 60% in Josephine County. That's 60. We only had 2 closings in Josephine County this week in the residential markets. Number of listings year over year are down 2% in Josephine County. We had 69 active listings on SOMLS in the residential market this week in Josephine County. Klamath County prices were up 6%. The average single family home this week year over year costing $242,600. Number of solds year over year in Klamath County were down 40%. That's 40. There were only 3 closings on SOMLS in Klamath County's residential market this week. Number of listings year over year in Klamath County were down 6%. We only had 67 active listings in the residential market in Klamath County this week. So, folks, this is just a snapshot into 1 week. I'm thinking we're going the wrong way on some of our counties, but like I said, it's only 1 week. Thank you to everybody who put their house on the market, because we have more houses than we did last year for sale, but it's still not enough to meet the demand. So if you're thinking of moving in even the next 12 months, call your local realtor and get an analysis and seriously consider doing that while we still have a low inventory environment. So speaking of low inventory, Brad Bennington from Southern Oregon Builders Association is going to talk to us about that. And also Guy Giles from Mutual Mortgage, who is on site in Mexico doing some volunteer work for a needy family. So happy to welcome them both on the air. Well, welcome back to the show, Guy and Brad. It's so great you could be on today.
Great to be here, Gail. You betcha.
Thank you. I'm a few miles away, so hopefully there's no delay.
Well, and for those of you who are not watching on YouTube, Guy Giles is doing a building project as a volunteer, I believe, in Mexico.
Yeah, I greet you all in Spanish, but I'm not very good at that at all.
Well, and
but I can swing a hammer.
Brad Bennington is from the Builders Association, so you're a great combo today. We're going to talk about the project in Mexico and how it compares to Oregon.
You betcha.
Well, probably one thing I noticed since I've been down here is the lack of building inspectors over the last 3 days. So we brought this thing from a cement slab to a fully framed house. I'll put it up in the background, and we are putting in the windows, and we'll be dedicating this house to a family that's worked hard enough to earn this land, but couldn't afford to put a house on it this
Oh, okay.
afternoon. So anyway, Brad, you could probably speak a little bit more towards how easy or not easy it is in Oregon to get this same thing accomplished.
Yeah. Allison, guy, great to be here with you this morning. You know, Oregon did not have a statewide building code until 1973. Senate Bill 100 passed in 1972.
Wow.
Created the legislative framework for what would become a statewide building code and what would become, land conservation development, which is morphed into DLCD, Department of Land Conservation Development, and the some would say the ridiculously arcane structure that makes Oregon the most land use regulated state in the entire nation. But before 1972, you could almost do what Guy and his team have just done. You could roll up on a piece of property, and in a very short period of time, you could build a home. Now, what Guy is working on there is what we call slab on grade construction. And what that means is that you pour a concrete slab, and then on top of the concrete slab, you just frame the house. Now we also have, and that's not terribly common nowadays because of insulation requirements and so on and so forth. Now what you see most of the time is you see a perimeter foundation, which is usually made out of either block or concrete. And then we have a wood floor framing system that goes in, and then the rest of the house is built on top of that. But the kind of point that we're sort of making here is the house that Guy and his team just built for this very needy family in Mexico to have a place for the family to be is probably not that much different from what we were building back in the 60s and the 70s. And the reason I mention that is that most of that housing that we built in the 60s and 70s and even the 40s and 50s before that is still here, and it's still being used. And Alice, since you're a professional realtor, you can look at the data on each one of the houses, and what you see is a tremendous amount of the housing inventory that people are living in today was in fact built before 1972, when it was easy to build. We didn't have a lot of, well, there was no land planning at all. So you could just buy a piece of property and build. Now, obviously, some regulatory structure is going to be needed, and we can't be the way that they can do it down in Mexico for a few reasons. But it really makes the point, I think. The average length of time that it takes a developer from the time he buys a piece of property until he can actually create a product on it to sell to the public as a home is about 3 years. About 3 years here in Oregon. So if I want to, so this is August 2024. If I want to be able to sell a house to someone in August of 2027, I need to buy the property now, and it's going to take me the next 3 years to get through all of the regulatory barriers I have to get through, to buy all the reports I need to buy, to do all the hydrology studies I need to do, to get through all of the regulatory barriers satisfied. It's going to take me about 2.5 years. Then it's going to take me another half a year just to get the house built to where I can have something I can actually sell to the public. All of that 3 years compared to what Guy and his team just did in a week. So one of the things that I like to remind our friends in the legislature when they start talking about affordable housing is the biggest enemy, the biggest opponent, the most powerful and dangerous opponent that we have in the development community is the clock and the calendar. Those are our most powerful and our most dangerous opponents, because the people on our side of the fence, we have to commit to this fully financially, right? In other words, to have that product that we can sell to the public 3 years from now, we have to financially commit to it today. We have to commit all the financial resources today, hoping that 3 years from now, the market conditions will be adequate so that we can begin recovering our investment. And if you want to look at it another way, like on a typical subdivision, and I don't say this by way of complaining. I'm just trying to give the public I'm trying to give your listeners some
data driven.
education is that let's say that we're going to do a 20 home subdivision, right? And let's say that each one of those homes is $500,000. So you got a $10 million subdivision. The people on my side of the fence, it's going to take us 3 years before we can sell the first home of that subdivision. We need to sell 8 of those homes before we've broken even. So we're 3 years from now before we can even sell one home. And now we have to sell 8, excuse me. I said 20 homes. We need to sell 80% of the homes in that subdivision before we have broken even to the point where we can even make a profit.
Wow, 80%.
Yeah, we've got to sell 80% of those homes to recover all of the investment that we have made, so that that last 20% of the homes, which in a 20 home subdivision, that'd be 4 homes. So
Yeah.
those last 4 homes are our profit. So we have to do all this work, invest all this money, invest all this time. 3 years down the road, got to sell 16 homes before we even begin to break even. Isn't that amazing?
Wow.
Yeah.
I don't know
Yeah.
how many people would want to take that bet.
Yeah, it's our developers exist and live in one of the most dangerous economic environments in the United States. It is really, really, it's tough stuff. Anyway, congratulations to Guy on building his house in 1 week. Yay.
Yeah, well, and we love our 1960s and 1970 houses here in Southern Oregon. We're going to have to take a quick break. We're going to talk more with Guy Giles doing his build in Mexico for a needy family, and Brad Bennington from the Builders Association. We'll be right back after a quick word from our loyal sponsors, Well, welcome back, Southern Oregon, to the Real Estate Show. We're with Brad Bennington of the Builders Association of Southern Oregon and Guy Giles Mutual Mortgage. And Guy is doing a volunteer build down in Mexico, and we're just chatting about that. Thanks for being on the show again, gentlemen.
You betcha.
I'm kind of blown away with the whole technology. Just down here in the middle of where I would consider nowhere. This whole subdivision, if you can call it that, behind me. There was no power to any of this last time I was here. And I did skip 1 year last year, but when I first came to town, there were no stoplights. 90% of everything had no electricity. So these guys are actually moving along pretty good. The people that we're building these houses for, they're basically migrant farm workers that have come up. We're down about 178 miles south of Tijuana down here. Driscoll's, whenever you walk into the store and see that brand name, that's the area that we're in. And there's just huge strawberry farms, and they do a lot of onions. And anyway, so we're just down here building a house for somebody. One thing that kind of struck me is, I don't know if Brad really went over any numbers as far as what it takes to even get to the point where you could build a house. But I believe that we're about aside from the land, which cost them about $5,000 for these little lots, maybe a tenth of an acre, cost us about $7,000 to build a house from the frame up. Obviously, it's volunteer time and that sort of thing, and we pray it's still standing next year when we come back. But they're actually stick-built houses that we're getting done. We don't need insulation like they do, or they don't need insulation like we have, So I do understand that there'd probably be a little bit more into building a house in the Northwest than there would be down here, but it doesn't seem like there's a lot of red tape for sure.
So, Guy, do they have air conditioning?
No, during the day they're generally working. And that's Shania walking by. She volunteers every year. No, they just open the windows or go outside. There's really none. I haven't had air conditioning in over a week down here. So, we've been here a week almost. But no, they don't really do that. But it cools down in the evenings, and in the mornings it's usually not too bad here. It gets hot during the middle of the day, but that's just kind of what they put up with.
So, Brad, when you hear about this kind of construction, it's pretty humble, but it is adequate, and it does remind us of the construction from the 60s and 70s here in Southern Oregon.
Yeah, and not just and not just in Oregon. You know, we're here in Southern Oregon, but you know the construction methods that we saw back in the 40s, 50s, and 60s was really widespread across the entire United States. You know, it was timber-based construction. You know, back in the day, you know, the Northwest really was a wonderful source of softwood, and so we had abundant materials to build with. The Pacific Northwest used to export lumber, you know, all across the Western United States. And you remember the building boom, you know, when the boomers came back from what would become known as the boomers came back from World War II.
Uh-huh.
That was our biggest expansion in residential building that we've ever seen in this country. Is that when our soldiers came back from World War II, they began starting families. You know, tremendous amount of construction activity. And the thing that it's important to remember is, you know, every generation has its own challenges, and they find their own way to do things that work for them. When the boomers came back, they had a situation where everyone in our country understood that we were kind of on the dawning of a golden age of economic prosperity, and everybody was willing to do their part, you know, and pull, and let's and we just saw this tremendous prosperity, which included a lot of residential construction. What we have now is we've moved into and I'm not trying to say anything controversial here, but we've moved into a period of extremely high regulatory activity on behalf of the government that is making it harder and harder and harder, more difficult, more expensive for people to afford housing, and harder for us to build housing. You know, we talked about how long it takes for us. So this is obviously we're not going to be able to build the kind of housing that Guy is building down there in Mexico on a volunteer basis. But the reality is that if we could have more flexibility in the type of housing, and sell people, if we could create the kind of housing that people really want to buy without all the things they don't really want to buy. Let me give you an example. The housing that we're building today is the finest housing that's ever been built on the face of the earth here in Oregon.
Wow.
It has the finest materials. It has the highest standards, the highest earthquake seismic standards, the highest energy standards, and it is the only housing that they will allow us to build. It's kind of like if you're going to shop for a car, you go to your local car lot, and you say, "This is my budget. This is the kind of car that I want to buy." Well, in our industry, they don't let us do that. The only kind of car you can buy in our industry is a Lexus, because that's all they will let us build. Once you say you're going to build a new home or buy a new home, the regulatory structure as it exists today forces us to build products that only have the finest materials and procedures and policies. And we really need to have a discussion about, I think it would be useful to have a discussion about, if people were able to buy just what they really wanted and needed, what would that look like?
And what would they want? You know, because most of the folks that I'm dealing with, they want 3-bedroom, 2-bath, single story in a neighborhood. And I don't think that that's the emphasis in Oregon, because Oregon, and I'm not being political, I'm being like you, data driven. There's a big push for high density, you know, that fill in kind of construction. Yeah.
Right.
And the state of Oregon supports that, less so single family residential development.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely true. I'll give you a quick example. How many minutes do we have left in this segment, Alice?
3.5.
Okay, we'll do it on the other side. I just want to mention something. This is a recent piece of legislation that's trying to make it through. It's House Joint Resolution 170. It's an energy based piece of legislation, and if it goes through, it's going to add between $22,000 and $30,000 to the cost of every new home in the built in America.
Oh, no.
And we're yeah, but again, it's on this energy thing. For people that are ideologically so disposed, there's no cost to benefit ratio anymore. In other words, if we can spend all of this money to save this much energy, right? This much money and save this much energy, we're going to make you do it. We're going to make you do it. It's going to take 50 years for this energy improvement to pay for itself, even if it ever does, but we're going to make you do it anyway. And you're going to have to borrow another $30,000 on that home because we want you to save that much more energy. That's what's going on.
So
This is a true story, political or not. I was sitting at breakfast with some young people. Actually, they're in the background building a house right now that they can't even afford at home, asking me why it's so hard to get into a house, why it's so expensive, and why the rates are so high. The rates are obviously a different factor, but these guys will build more houses for somebody else than they'll ever own if we don't do something to change it. And that's the part that gets me is I always felt if I got up and worked hard every day that I would be able to have my own little spot, and I was able to do that. And I think all of us just want that for the next generation. And every time they come out and say, well, we just, built 30,000 doors, 30,000 new houses in Chicago, they're talking about apartment buildings. They're not talking about what the people want, which is a little space for a dog. Anyway,
a couple of kids in the backyard.
Yeah.
Guy is absolutely right.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting, the pushback from the state legislator, speaking of Oregon, specifically, against 3-bedroom, 2-bath, single family housing. And they just make it so expensive that the builders go ahead and do the apartment buildings, and that's what the banks will give them money for. And then there's more rentals.
Well, yeah, they found out that they can get what they want accomplished in other ways just by making it too hard. So
yeah, exactly. We're talking to Guy Giles from Mexico of Mutual Mortgage, Brad Bennington here in Medford from our local Builders Association of Southern Oregon. So Guy, how long are you going to be down there working on this house? We have 20 seconds.
We'll hand the house over today, this afternoon. It'll be all done. Again, we're just finishing all the trim work. And then we'll start traveling back Saturday morning. So we do get one day at the beach. It's kind of a nowhere beach. And anyway, so we'll go down and swim a little bit tomorrow and then prepare to go. And then 6 a.m. we'll be heading back north.
Okay, we'll take a quick break and we'll be back with Guy and Brad. Well, let's say thank you to our sponsors. We appreciate you very much. We're gratefully brought to you by John L. Scott, Ashland, and Medford, our local Rogue Valley Association realtors, and Guy Giles. Well, hey, Southern Oregon, welcome back to the Real Estate Show. Just a reminder, we're going to repeat this episode tomorrow, Sunday at 8 a.m. on the ACE AM 1300. We're talking to Brad Bennington, our Southern Oregon Builders Association representative, and Guy Giles. And Guy Giles is doing a volunteer residential housing build down in Mexico. And we're coming live from Mexico. Thanks for being on the show, gentlemen.
You betcha.
Hey, thank you for having me back. I'm glad I'm able to actually do this from here. I'd forgot about it.
So in the last segment, Guy, you mentioned that you have some volunteers working with you on site right now, and they're not homeowners and they're volunteering to build somebody a house. How is that? That doesn't seem right. Are they from America?
Yeah. Most of them are Southern Oregon. We got a couple. This is actually a big group. We got some people from Wisconsin, some people from Canada. The Montana group usually joins us, and then a lot of them from Southern Oregon. So just a little bit of everybody.
Well, where are these particular people from?
Well, the Canadians, we make them go build their own house.
Okay.
Houses. So the two that I've kind of had on film, the one below me there, they're letting all the interns. So they're a bunch of college students from SOU that are affiliated with Ashland Christian Fellowship, and they come every year. And I don't know how, but they were a little ahead of us this year. And then we got a couple of the families and some of the younger guys building our house here. And they're just volunteers from around. And
Mhm.
nice thing is, one of these days when they can become homeowners, they'll probably know a little bit about construction, and maybe they can make up a little bit of that extra cost by doing a couple things themselves around the house. But
Yeah.
it's just a cool thing. You just get to hand a set of keys to somebody that's never had a locking door in their life.
Well,
So
it's amazing that you're done today and you just started like less than 2 weeks ago. Is that
but
right?
we started 3 days ago. This is our
You
fourth day.
started 3 days ago?
Yeah, yeah. So we build the walls, push them up. We build the roof, and then lift it on in a few sections and bolt it down. And then, but of course, you know, they've outlawed some stuff even down here. You can't have any ammunition or anything, so we can't even shoot the floor joists into the concrete anymore. We have to drill all that. But that wasn't the end of the world. But
Well, I
so
didn't
they do have
realize
a
that was
regulation here. They have a regulation here that we had to go up against, but we got through it.
That's
So,
funny.
Brad, how ironic is this that
Very.
that guy is down there doing really stick-built construction just like here without
Yeah.
air conditioning.
Yeah.
It's a little simplified, but 3 days.
Yeah. So the automobile example of what he's doing is the 1960s Volkswagen Bug. Remember that little air-cooled
Uh-huh.
engine, four-door, no air conditioning, but they ran forever. They were economical, and you remember the newspaper ad, 2 pennies a mile, 2 pennies a mile, right? The
Yeah.
guy's driving this Volkswagen thing. It's only cost me 2 pennies a mile. So
Yeah.
that's what Guy and his team are building down there, and up here in Southern Oregon in our hyper regulated environment. They're forcing people to buy, whether you want it or not. You're going to have a Lexus when it comes to a new home. There's some room for discussion here, but what I do want to say, since we're kind of talking about it, is we're not going to be able to fix this overnight in housing. But when it comes to the housing that's there, and for people that are desiring to buy new housing, price is what you pay, value is what you get, and this is where I would say to your listeners, there is much more value in a newer home than there is an older home. In other words, if you're looking at a home that was built within the last 10 years, there's a lot more value there. And it's not that much more expensive than a home that was built 20, 30, 40, or even 50 years ago. If you look at a 1,700 square foot house that's less than 10 years old compared to one that's 50 years old, there's probably only $50,000 difference in the price, but there's so much more value in the newer home. So there's still, I want to encourage your listeners, Alice, if they find a newer home, a home that's been built within the last 10 years, like 2015, 2012, or newer, they can go talk to Guy about getting that financed, because this is what I see. Our cost of construction is not going down. Our cost of construction, and the biggest chunk of the money is in the land, and their buildable land is not coming online very fast. So again, 40% of the cost of a new home is in regulatory compliance. When you look at that
Wow.
$500,000 home, 40% of that, or $200,000, is simply regulatory compliance, and that's not getting fixed anytime soon.
See, and
So if
that's the
there's
difference between us in Oregon and
anywhere
some
else,
of the more business-friendly
yeah.
states in the United States.
So there's some good newer homes out there. They can talk to you about finding these homes, and they can talk to Guy about getting it financed. But the cost of construction is not going down anytime soon. So for your listeners that can qualify to get a newer home, that would be my suggestion on where the best values are.
So we have a whole big group of people that do not want new construction because they feel the materials are inferior. And they will tell me as a real estate agent that they only want to look at older construction because the studs are bigger, the nails are bigger. So what would you weigh in on that, Brad? Because we've got certain camps with certain opinions.
Yeah, yeah. Well, if you buy a home that was built in the 1960s, it was built here in Southern Oregon. It was built with probably first growth timber, and it's true that the quality of the timber was better, and maybe the nails, were a little bit better steel and things like that. But you have to look at the structural integrity of the actual assembly when everything's put together. And the
I see.
reality is that, especially if you're in East Medford, you know, houses that were built on the slopes up there, there's a lot of houses up there that had failed foundations because they didn't understand the engineering things the way that we do now.
Right.
So, I said earlier, and I mean it, I'll say it again. The homes that we are building here in Southern Oregon are literally the finest homes that have ever been built on this planet. In terms of the engineered fill that goes underneath, the engineered footings, the quality of the materials, that's one of the reasons that they're so expensive. There really is a lot of value there. But you know, is a 2x4 from the 1960s might be better, theoretically better than a 2x4 from 2024. But when it's all integrated in the plan and put together the way it's supposed to be, it's not. The houses that we have in terms of energy performance, seismic resistance, strength, durability, all especially windows, right? I mean, you don't want a window from the 1960s.
Well,
I'll just
that's
say,
true. I'll give you
yeah,
that.
yeah. You don't want a water heater. You don't want windows, right? People want modern appliances. You want quiet. You want good insulation. So, your customers will be well served if they look for homes that were built 2015 and newer. And even though the interest rates aren't quite as low as they were a while ago, they're still not bad. You know, my wife and I, the first home we had was 9.5% interest. We bought it in 1976, 9.5% FHA loan.
Wow.
People at 9.5% today. It's like, oh my gosh, 9.5%. You know,
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
Well,
like hard money numbers.
we should probably concede one point, Brad, that when you talk about it being better energy standards, better things, I mean, some good has come out of the, you know, the people that are trying to regulate the hell out of us, for lack of a better word. But that said, the answer's got to be somewhere in the middle. We're just getting pushed around by one side at this point, and there has to be just some sort of compromise so that we still have good energy standards, we still have, you know, well constructed houses, but you have more appliances to choose from than maybe one super efficient one. Because I know recently I've had a couple of experiences where an appliance is broke down and you can't even repair it anymore. So
correct.
if you're making something to the point where you can't even fix it, what does that do to the landfill? Sure, you might be able to recycle some of that, but it takes a lot of energy to have to build a new stove. So why not build something that could last a little bit longer, like the old days? I have an ice maker that's been broke on a refrigerator that I bought brand new, and it's been broken for 4 out of the 6 years that I've owned it. And
Oh,
they told me
wow.
it wasn't even worth trying to get it fixed. So I don't know, maybe somewhere in the middle might be nice.
Well,
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of truth in that because the stuff you buy from the big box stores, it doesn't last as long, and neither do the furnaces, and neither do the
Right.
hot water heaters. You know, everything's got a shorter lifespan.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Much shorter.
Yeah, much shorter. So when somebody says they long for the, 60s and 70s, I can certainly circle back with them on that. But I agree with you. You don't want windows, and you certainly don't. That furnace is not going to be working anymore. Not if it was put in the 70s, and neither is the hot water heater. We're talking to Brad Bennington from Southern Oregon Builders Association, Guy Giles, Mutual Mortgage, who is building a house as a volunteer down in Mexico this week. So he's broadcasting to us live from on site from the building. Thanks so much.
In the middle of two.
In the middle. We'll be right back with a quick word from our sponsors. Well, welcome back to the Real Estate Show. We're with Guy Giles, Mutual Mortgage, and Brad Bennington from the Southern Oregon Builders Association. Yeah, we're having a great conversation. Guy Giles is down in Mexico volunteering to build a house.
And I'd like to have Brad, if he could speak to something. It's easy to get upset about all the extra hoops we have to jump through to get a house, but how do you suggest people get involved rather than, hey, the radio's over, now something new's on and I'm off to mow the yard on a Saturday morning? How do you think the best way for people to let their voices be heard? Because that's probably the only way to
Yeah,
really
that's a good question.
get
Yeah.
anything moved.
Yeah. So, home ownership is so critical because it's real estate improvements that pay for so much of everything else. 80% of education in the state of Oregon is paid for by real estate improvements. And home ownership is the most significant source of wealth for most people. So owning a home is just so important for families and our community. And people can communicate that by simply talking to their legislators. You know, here in the state of Oregon, we've got 30 state senators, we've got 60 House representatives. Talk to Kim Wallen, talk to Pam Marsh, talk to Dennis Linthicum, talk to Jeff Golden, talk to, letters, emails, show up at meetings, talk to us. We have, here at the Builders Association, we can help you get your message to the legislators. We talk to these people all the time. Let them know how important it is to you not to just live in an 800 square foot cracker box, but how important it should be to them to help develop housing that is housing that people actually want to live in, but at a price per square foot that's affordable, especially for our young people. Talk to your legislators. That's the best thing to do, Guy.
Perfect.
Yeah, it is so important for young people to be able to buy a house. All of us older folks knew we would be homeowners. We just knew that. But I have a big concern that not all young people will be homeowners. And it's curious that some of them don't want to be. There's not very many of those, but more so than in our generation.
Well, Governor Brown's executive order that created climate-friendly, equitable communities is forcing communities to overbuild apartments to try to reduce vehicle miles traveled. This is an executive order. The legislature never saw it. It's been implemented all across the state of Oregon. So we're seeing cities build overbuild apartments just really at this point to do nothing more than comply with CFET, call it CFET.
I
But
see.
the reality is our families, they want to live in 3-bedroom, 2-bath, with attached garage, nice little. That's what our families really want to live in. So we kind of have to fight for that. If that's what we want our young people to have, we need to fight for that. We need to talk to our legislators about making that possible.
And it
Maybe
just takes
get
a minute to send an email or make a quick phone call. You don't even
mhm.
have to take up your whole day doing it. But
Maybe
if
get
enough
a
people
group to
do it,
go up to Salem when they're talking about that.
You
wouldn't
betcha.
hurt.
So
Wouldn't hurt.
the stability that is gained by home ownership in communities is documented by the National Association of Realtors. It is a real thing. And there's pride of ownership. It creates a tighter sense of community. And we're not dissing renters, but you find more problems when there's more renters. That's just the data. We're not being political or opinionated on that one, but it's a real documented thing that there's stability created in communities through home ownership.
Well, Guy sees that with his customers all the time. He'll take someone that's a renter, and for just a little bit more per month, he'll get them into their own home. 10 years later, if you're paying $1,500 a month rent, every year they're going to raise your rent a little bit, and 10 years later, you're still paying rent and you have nothing to show for it. 10 years later of making your house payment, you'll have $150,000 of equity to show for it. It's a
And
big
that's if it
difference.
doesn't go up in value.
Correct.
Yeah, you'll pay the thing down and it'll also go up in value as far as that goes. And I mean, it just makes everything more stable if you're a homeowner. I mean, how could you be a 100% productive worker if you just got a notice in the mail that your family's going to have to move in 30 days because the landlord decided to sell his or her property?
Yeah.
You're just in that influx all the time. But he's right. Your payment is going to get frozen at this time. Maybe not right now, but then if you refinance, once you get a good low rate, that's not going to change. Your taxes and insurance might go up a little bit each year. But I've ran the math and it makes so much more sense just a few years down the road buying a house rather than paying rent. It's beyond all of the nice things there is with home ownership, having your own little yard, paint the place like you want it. Anyway, it just goes on and on and on. Monetarily also.
Yeah, well, in Southern Oregon, appreciation outpaces the national average a lot of times because we're highly desirable and we have the infrastructure. You know, we have the international airport, we have the two massive hospitals, we have the I-5 corridor. So all of that creates value. And we have Northern California weather patterns. So Southern Oregon land and property do appreciate faster than most parts of the United States. So,
Well,
yeah.
I heard
So,
daily people coming in. I'm waiting until house prices drop. And this was 3 years ago, 4 years ago. And what are they up? 40,
oh,
46%? There's not enough
yeah.
houses. Even if they build 1 million apartments, there still won't be enough single family houses that people actually want. So I don't see this big correction that not everybody. Now I think people have come to the realization, but
Well, it's
I don't think
almost
there's
over.
I know, I know, I know, and I'm happy for the
This
ones that
is
got
our
in.
correction. Yeah. Yeah. People don't believe us. So,
Well,
in the 4 minutes we have left, do you want to talk a little bit about interest rates?
yeah, we're on the right track. You know, the Fed has kind of a what they call a dual mandate. It's not just inflation, but it's the unemployment, and both of those things are pointing the right direction for some lower rates down the road. Like I've been beating this drum for a while. The biggest fear is, hey, I'm going to wait till rates drop. Well, there's a lot of people waiting till rates drop. So if you can find the right house now and make the payment and just, I mean, in the long run, if the worst thing happened, make sure you could make that payment forever if you didn't refinance. But know that the rates are going to come down and there's just going to be a frenzy for everybody's house again. And you're going to be bidding way over for it. So if you can get into something now, I would really suggest it. We're already starting to see the rates coming down. It's on a pretty steady trajectory. The Fed will, I almost thought they might have an emergency cut after the job numbers came out last week. They haven't, but there's a high probability, over 80% that it'll be a 50. The only debate is in September, are we doing a 50 basis point cut or a 25 basis point cut? I think they'll probably do something, ahead of an election, whatever it takes to help our people. I mean, that's at the end of the day who I want to help. But, it's coming, and there's no denying that it's time for them to start easing up on the money situation. So
Mhm.
it's going to happen whether they do anything or not. It's already happening in our end. And just know that by the time the Fed lowers rates, we've already baked in lower rates with our mortgages because our people
Gotcha.
are looking ahead at what they're going to be doing. So don't expect, to call up your lender. Hopefully it's me, but call up your lender on the day the Fed cuts rates. Hey, how much did rates go down? Because we probably factored that in a week or two in advance. We're already seeing that happen, and it's been happening for a week and a half, 2 weeks now on our rates.
So that's a sign of the digital market.
Yeah, and we've always looked ahead. Unfortunately the Fed is more of a rear view mirror looking entity that averages out the last 12 months. Well, if the 6 of the last 12 months were high, even if where we are right this second is really, really low, even under their target, you're still waiting to play catch up because you're averaging 12 months out. So
Gotcha.
they'll get there, and then hopefully they won't look back and say, oh, we waited too long to loosen it, like they did 2 years later after they took way too long to tighten it. So I guess we'll see.
Well, yeah, and we don't want to live our life based on what the Fed does or doesn't do.
That's a good point. That's a really
Yeah,
good point.
yeah, because they break our hearts all the time.
Yes.
So Alice and Guy, the thing that's so important, I think, Guy, you're helping people finance the homes they need to buy. Alice, you're helping your people locate them. So of the housing that's available, apartments, you get absolutely no residual benefit at all. Condominiums, again, when you buy a condominium, you're not buying the dirt, you're just buying the improvement above the dirt. So there's some improvement in value, but not a lot. But the biggest value for your people is when you buy a single family detached home. They appreciate the best. They're going to build a value for you. So Alice, if your people, help your people find single family detached housing, get Guy to finance it, and the sooner you get that home, the sooner you can begin building equity in your own home.
So be a homeowner,
Be a homeowner.
build wealth, and be happy. Thanks,
Yes.
Brad. Thanks,
Yes.
Guy.
Hey,
We-
thanks you guys.
We appreciate John L. Scott, Ashland and Medford, Guy Giles, Mutual Mortgage, and our local Rogue Valley Association of Realtors for their sponsorship. Have a great Southern Oregon weekend. Bye now.